Mom and Daddy had 7 kids in 8 years. Daddy was pretty, strict is not a good word. He was fair, very fair. You needed your butt whipped. Back in those days they did. You got your butt whipped. Mama had the personality, which a lot of people say that Joe and I followed with her personality. You know, never met a stranger. We grew up on Tetro Street. We had the Ladays, we had the Ladays, we had the Ladays, we had the Toops, we had the Benoits, we had the Fakiers.
We talked about the Tetro gang, growing up on Tetro Street, all the kids around that area, and just, you know, playing all day long and the different things they did. So he was very fond of his childhood memories.
It was Tetro against Blake Court a lot of times at the events. But the Tetro had so many more people than we did.
With Daddy being principal at Thibodeau High School, we had access to the gym, which was right down the street. We had access to the stadium. We had access to Peltier Park, which was, what, 3-4 blocks away. So we were always outside. Lance, Craig, Lenny, and Chris and Claire Ford, our first cousins, they had Ford's Field next to their house. So if we weren't at a walking distance thing, we were at the Fords playing basketball, baseball, football, whatever.
No, it was always athletics. All the teams we competed against, and Joe was a year behind me, but you know, we went out to all the same teams.
Well, I knew Joe all my life. Matter of fact, we lived on the same street. I went to school with him all these years, but of course, Joe was into sports, and the boys, never around girls when we were younger.
A good day for us was going and get a 5 or 10 cent snowball, you know, just talking, but not just about practice or game, just about friendship, you know. And we just had a really, really close friendship.
I have my theories that he liked wide receiver a little bit more because he didn't get hit as much, and we always joked with him, or he always joked with us about how much of a chicken he was.
That's what he used to always say, buck, 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 I'm chicken. And you couldn't catch him, and that's true.
I mean, the majority of folks immediately say, oh my goodness, that man was crazy. Not as crazy as his brother Chris, but he was crazy.
You know, when people would ask me the same thing, oh, are you married to Joe Fakier's daughter? And the two things they would say were he's crazy and how great of an athlete he was.
We used to play on rainy days when they had a gym. We used to play two-hand touch on a basketball court. Try to get a two-hand touch Joe Fakier, shoot, couldn't do it. If Joe would have hit the weight room, I don't know what Joe would have been like, man. Joe went for every day. It was a different sport, especially in spring with football and basketball. That was the sport. But he went to the spring, he had track and baseball. I mean, he never had a chance to get in the weight room.
When I was at 80 White, I didn't even know he was a Cardinal great, to be honest with you, until we walked into the gym and saw his picture on the wall.
When I said ex-post, everybody just looked. And that means we were going to him. And man, we hit him right on the numbers he scored. I guess we could have did that almost 90% of the time, but we didn't. He didn't want to play quarterback his senior year in high school. He wanted to be a receiver and a defensive back.
The summer before our senior year, his mom was actually in charge of the cheerleaders at E.D. White, and I was a cheerleader, and she was making our pep rally uniforms. So we started going to their house over the summer to get fitted, and whenever we'd go, he'd be there, and he would kid with me all the time, joking around with me. And after a while, his mom says, took him about to the side, and she just kind of whispered in my ear, you know, he only does that because he likes you. And so then first football game came around, and he asked me to wait after the game for him, and he walked me home. And that was it.
Joe was seriously considering Ole Miss because they had talked to him about playing baseball as well as football. The guy recruiting him from Ole Miss, Johnny Hurry Kane, Daddy's old college coach.
He had a scholarship to Ole Miss, and if it wouldn't have been for his daddy, who at the time was sick, was kind of encouraging him to please go to LSU so he'd get to go to more games, and I think that's what made him go to LSU.
my junior year, I transferred to LSU, and he found out that they had a scholarship, that his old coach, Charlie Mack, had started a scholarship foundation, and it was for former LSU football players' children. And so he researched that, we applied, and I just remember getting it and how excited he was, and how it kind of, I guess, justified that him going to LSU was for a good reason and a good purpose, and it actually was a full paid scholarship that I received.
When he was at LSU, he loved it. He loved the friends he made, the friendships. He loved everything about LSU, and did to the very end.
When I went to LSU, I worked in the sports information office, and we had to, me and one of my coworkers, one of the other student workers, we had to go and start working in the filing room. And the guy came out one day and goes, "Michelle, do you realize your dad threw 3 touchdown passes and he wasn't even a quarterback?" And so like that was big running, I don't want to say a running joke because it wasn't a joke, but he thought got a big kick out of it.
He had told me, he says, look, he says, if I do it tonight at the game, he says, I'm gonna raise up my helmet, and that's gonna let you know that I'm gonna throw it. And what it was, the girlfriend sat right behind the bench. So we were just a few feet away from him. So sure enough, you know, the game's going on, and he raised up his helmet, and then he went in and he did throw it.
Dad's 3 touchdowns that he threw as a wide receiver was his most proud stat that he's ever had in his life. He used to tell us all the time he's probably the only wide receiver in the country, maybe to this day, that has thrown more touchdown passes than he caught.
More important than that was when he caught his 1 touchdown pass, and he caught it from Burt Jones. Went 48 yards for a touchdown. I mean, I was on the sideline, so I was going crazy for that. The passes I knew were coming. He actually threw 5, completed 3, all 3 for touchdowns.
Of course, his dad was an excellent athlete, they said. And he was a coach. And it was always, he was going into education and he was going to be teaching. He didn't want the classroom, but, you know, PE classes he could handle. And that's all he did was PE.
It became evident that Coach Cam Morvaunt, our high school football coach, who was also an Edie White star, was bringing Joe Fakier onto our coaching staff. Of course, we were all excited. Former LSU player is going to coach Vandebilt Catholic. Me, Harry McCullough, and Russell Andree were practicing punting one day, and we were booming them. We were hitting them pretty good that day. And Joe Fakier came up, said, "You mind if I punt with y'all?" It was a sight to see. And I can remember looking at Harry that day and going, you know what? We're really not that good.
Joe was an excellent coach. Really great, really good. He loved baseball.
He would get kicked out of the game to motivate his players. But he never said that. He didn't come home and say, hey, this is, you know, I'm getting kicked out, or I'm planning on getting kicked out. But that's what he did, and he did it on purpose. And so just as a young, you know, child, that was always an anxiety for me. But I definitely remember that vividly. There was even a time where he got kicked out and was sent, he went sit in center field. And he would give plays to his center fielder to call into the pitcher.
I was in my 2nd semester of college at LSU. Dad was coaching at Assumption again at the time, and they had a game at Bruley High. I got there at the bottom of the 1st, and when I walked up, I found him behind the dugout, as we usually did, with a cigarette in one hand and a Diet Coke in the other hand. I walked up to him, told him hello, gave him a kiss, and just simply asked, "Already?" And his response right away was, "We had a slow start, I needed to pump up my guys, and the umpires were idiots."
I can remember our first game of the season was against Edie White, and the fans were leaning over the side rails of the stadium. And I heard repeatedly, look, there's Joe Fakier. And as we're walking in, I turned to Coach Fakier and I said, "Coach, what is it? Everybody knows you over here." But what he wasn't telling me was that he was a legend at Edie White. Everybody knew Joe Fakier.
I was talking to Andree during the day, and I told her we had a baseball game that day, and we were playing her dad. And I said, "Oh, by the way, we're playing your dad tonight in baseball." She said, "Yeah, I know, I do the book." I said, "Okay," and I was just trying to make conversation with her. And I said, "Yeah, I really can't hit a curveball. I was really never taught the right way to hit it." I managed to only see curveballs the rest of that game. So walking off the field, her and I just kind of randomly meet up, and I just looked at her and I said, "You told him, didn't you?" And she said, "Yeah, I told him."
Brian's senior year was very special. Jonathan and I had just gotten married in July. He started his senior year, and they ended up going into the state championship. They ended up playing for a state championship that year, which had never been done at Edie White before. So it really was just a special year for the whole family. You know, having Jonathan as my husband, their son-in-law, brother-in-law, having Brian, our brother, playing. My dad always kept the book. So it was really a special moment. Not only, you know, my dad obviously loved it, enjoyed every second of it. He respected that boundary between parent and coach just because Dad was a coach himself.
When I was actually picking up Andree for a date, and I still remember to this day the first thing he told me was he said, "You see her right there? She's worth $1 million. So make sure you bring her back to me."
He ended up staying on as graduate assistant at LSU for a semester. Then he went to Nichols, and one of his friends was like keeping the books for the basketball games, and they needed somebody one night, and they asked him if he'd do it. After that, he stayed on. They asked him to, do it, and he did it for the girls and boys basketball. And then, like I said, he started announcing baseball games. And from there, he started I guess it's like an internet radio type thing, like a live streaming for softball and baseball so parents could hear the games.
Well, I was the men's basketball SID at one point when he was still keeping the book for him. And then I was also the baseball sports information director. So he and I really worked closely together for baseball because I was keeping the stats and he was right next to me doing the PA. And I always joked with him, I was like, you realize, at home you can tell me what to do, but over here, I'm in charge of you. So you better watch what you say.
He believed in respect and responsibilities and so on, and old-fashioned ways.
You would have thought my dad was more military. He was very disciplined, and I know he got that from his parents. But you walked a straight line with him, and so he taught that to us, and it came back. I think his main thing would be respect. He taught respect. He wanted you to respect yourself, respect others.
He would come outside with us and help us be a better player and play ball with us, no matter if it was baseball, basketball, volleyball.
So he was a little more strict with me for being a guy and being a boy and how you treat women. But at the same time, he used to tell my sisters all the time, I get to do things they couldn't do because I was a guy. He was very thrilled when the perfect child, the last child, was born and was a boy. And we have pictures from when we were at the field. I'm in a car seat. And he was so thrilled that he put my hand over my junk, just because that's what a man did. And so he was so stoked that he had a guy, but he didn't really treat me any different. If anything, he might have been a little less strict with me, but not much.
Huge Andy Griffith Show fan. He had books and books. He could recite every episode, start to finish, knew them all.
He was a big St. Louis Cardinals fan, so he would always watch Cardinals games.
St. Louis Cardinals, when you go in Joe's house, he had the book, and he was actually doing the book on a damn game on TV.
Yeah, he loved Stan Musial.
He was a Statler Brothers fan. I remember going on family vacations, and if there was a minor league baseball park within a 1 hour radius, if not a 2 hour radius, we were stopping.
We're learning so much more now that he's passed, and this whole experience with the Bayou Region Athletic Hall of Fame has been just great to get to know all these stories, and it's very humbling that my dad was the player that he was and the coach that he was, and that we're just starting to learn about it. So it tells a lot about who he was.
Reminiscing and thinking about all that he accomplished and sharing it with them again and with the grandkids.
I know my era, and I've been around coaching my whole career, and I know all the athletes, and Edie White has some very good athletes. But but bar none, Joe Fakier was the best athlete to ever come through E.D. White.